So, as the title says, today I want to talk about the books I've been reading while I've been too intimidated to finish the book, It. So, the reason I wanted to do this is because it has been about a month or so since I've started reading It, and I've gotten 222 pages in. And in that time, I have read 3 books and almost 4, which I'll get to in a minute. But I want to talk about why that is, because it is not a bad book. I think it is just a little bit intimidating. And there's a couple reasons why it's an intimidating read, and one that's kind of hard, I think, at least for me, to read all the way through in one sitting. And like I said, a couple reasons. I think number one, obviously, is the size. I mean, this thing is dictionary sized. It's biblical. It's 1,142 words long. So it's big. This is not the type of book that, for example, you're going to take on a weekend trip with you in a bag. It's just too big for that. Maybe, some people might feel differently about that. For me, I really wouldn't want this thing taking up space if I were to go away for the weekend or read it anywhere that's not my house. It's just hard to transport. That's not to say that it's a hard read. It's really, I haven't actually read a single sentence out of this, I'd say, in the last week, just because, working full time, the last 9 to 5, the last thing I want to do kind of when I come home is sit down with a book. I want to melt into the couch and watch TV or play video games or something. But that's not to say that this is a hard read. It's not too strenuous to read through. We're not, having to look up words in the dictionary or anything. Not that anyone does that anymore. But, it's not, you don't have to think too hard when you're reading this book. A lot of characters that, are being mentioned, so there's a lot of names thrown out. You might have to think about that a little bit. But it's not a hard read. It's just hard to read, if that makes any sense. The second reason for me why this is kind of an intimidating read, it's hard to read all at once, is because it, I think at least, is Stephen King's magnum opus, right? This is one of his certainly longer works, but I think one of his best works, and I haven't even finished it, and that's just from what I've, gathered from reviews and other videos talking about it. Even people who don't necessarily know who Stephen King is probably have seen the movie It. When getting this book, I knew that this was something I wanted to not skim through, not read too quickly. I wanted to enjoy it, knowing that this is one of Stephen King's best work, and since I'm a fan of Stephen King, I wanted to give him my full attention when reading this. And so this has been one of those books that I want to read in certain situations. This isn't a book that I want to read a chapter of before I want to go to bed. I want to read a couple chapters. I want to blow through as much as I can in one sitting to kind of take it all in as much as I can for as long as I can, because again, this is not a weekend read, unless you're a super fast, crazy reader. But if you're like me and you work 9 to 5 and you're really, your prime reading time is going to be like a Sunday morning, with a cup of coffee, and that's kind of the tone I like to set when reading these kind of books that I know I want to read. I've been wanting to read for a long time. And so that's kind of the only time I really want to read this book. I want to give it the time that I want to enjoy it, if that makes any sense. I hope I'm not talking too much in circles about that. But anyway, that's what I've got to say on why this is a hard read, and why it's intimidating to read. And since it's intimidating to read, and since I like to read, in the process of reading through this book, I've finished some other books in the meantime, and I'm going to get into those right now. So since it is obviously a work of fiction, horror fiction specifically, the books that I've been reading in the meantime have been the opposite of that. So I've got a couple of true crime books here. I guess I've got one horror fiction and then an autobiography. And I'll just go through this quick because, not necessarily everyone cares about this, but this is just, something to share. The first book that I finished while attempting to read it is called Born Evil. It is a true crime book by Adrian Havill about a serial killer named Haddon Clark, who I had not heard about ever before picking up this book. I got this at a used bookstore in my the town where my parents live for $4.50, and I like these kind of shorter true crime kind of books. There's not a whole lot of effort that has to go into reading these. These you can kind of fly through. There's no mystery. Obviously, like there's a mugshot on the front cover. There's not a whole lot of thought that has to go into reading this. You can kind of just breeze through it like you would a Netflix docuseries. Kind of sticking to the nonfiction theme, I also got Escape from Camp 14, which is a biography about a guy who escaped from North Korea. And from what I remember, I read this a couple weeks ago now, so I don't exactly remember every little detail. But from what I recall, he's the first person to ever escape North Korea that was born in a North Korean concentration camp. So that aspect of this book is really interesting. You get to hear about his upbringing inside of a concentration camp. And this is in the late 80s and 90s, I think. So it's kind of crazy to think about that this wasn't that long ago. And it's a really good read about his story of escaping, his thoughts and feelings growing up in the camp, the family dynamics and stuff that are just so different and absolutely divorced from Western standards, and ultimately also his journey to the West. I think he lives in California now. But yeah, that's the other book that I've read while I've been too intimidated and anxious to read it, Escape from Camp 14. Now, the third book, you will see that I have a bookmark in here. I haven't exactly finished this one. This is a newer pickup for me, but it is called Clown in a Cornfield. I just realized you can't see the cornfield part from the barcode. I got this through, I think it's called ABC Books, the used bookstore through Amazon, but this is a library discarded copy, so it was only a couple bucks. And I've been wanting to read this. I've heard reviews that call this book, like a teen slasher kind of movie turned into book format. And that's what I get from this. This book is about a girl who moves from the big city to a small town in Missouri called Kettle Springs. And this town is basically there's a big divide between older adults and younger kids in the town. There's tension between the two groups, and it all kind of centers around an incident that happened with one of the kids. Again, I'm not super far in here, so I don't have a lot to spoil, but that's the dynamic that I've gathered from this book so far. It reads kind of like a teen slasher book. I think it's meant for young adults. I'm not exactly sure what category this would fall into. I imagine kind of like a young adult horror fiction kind of category, but that is something I guess I'll have to check back in about. But otherwise, yeah, this is the third book that I've been reading, Clown in a Cornfield. And the last book, as you'll see, another bookmark in here. I have not finished this yet, but I've been plowing through it. This is, about 3 days worth of reading for me, about 200 something page in. I've read more of this than I have of it, which, I don't have anything to say about that. But it's, It Rose for Her Grave by Anne Rule, who is one of my favorite true crime writers. She was a former Seattle policewoman, and writes very much like an investigative journalist, and she covers a lot of true crime cases out of the Seattle, Metro, Washington, Pacific Northwest area. And again, like that first true crime book that I had, this is a easy read. It reads again like a true crime Netflix docuseries. Obviously, since it's true crime, there's no mystery. You kind of know what's happening the whole time. And it's just interesting to read about, a new case that you haven't heard of before. This one is about a husband who murders multiple of his wives for insurance money. Probably could make a good Netflix docuseries, but it's a good read. It's easy, it's enjoyable, it's something that you can pick up and put down pretty easily. But yeah, this is a really good true crime book if you like those kind of things. But that kind of concludes this dumb video that I am now realizing doesn't really have a whole lot of plot. But those are the books that I've read while I've been too intimidated to finish it. See you next time. Say goodbye, Charming.